Right?
Hi, Kristin. Great to see you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all those resources. They just keep building every time I sign in and check in. So please keep checking into sexandrelationshiphealing.com. I'm sure you'll see more and more of what you need from that area, from that resource. But hello, my name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed therapist in California, but this particular webinar is not therapy. It's just some kind of psychoeducational lecturing discussion open to questions, etc. But actually today, we've been doing a little bit of series on exploring our own shame, our own struggles with vulnerability. And now we're kind of moving into another really important piece in that under those categories, which is empathy and compassion. What are they? How to practice them, how to improve your skills, how to maybe even help coach your friends and loved ones to help you or be better in that respect. And I want to first start my lecture on empathy and compassion by sharing a story. So I am in the summer season up to my eyeballs in summer camp, driving to work, logistics, packing lunches, putting on sunblock. I am struggling with my schedule, with time management. As a consequence, yesterday, I dropped my son off without a lunch, and I instantly fell into a shame spiral of I'm the worst mom in the world, my poor baby. And then obviously I had to come up with a plan B when we were there. There wasn't time for me to go back home because I had to get to work to run a group. And so that, extra time of coming up with a plan B caused me to be a few minutes late to work. So I'm driving to work, trying to go fast. And I'm just, what I am not is in those moments is I'm certainly not present. I'm definitely in this ruminating spiral of kind of self-deprecating thoughts of like, why can't you get your stuff together? You just need to get up earlier. You're not doing this right. Gosh, maybe you need to cut back your hours. Maybe you need to ask for more help. Just constantly clamoring that I can't even be present to be driving. And then certainly if I'm running a group with other people who need my help in states of struggle, I'm going to struggle being present with that. So I know when I get in those states, when I get in those shame spirals, when I get in those negative kind of talking moments, the only way out is to share my struggle with other people. Why? Because I'm searching for or hoping for empathy and compassion, that there's other people out there that are struggling the way that I do, and that maybe I'm not officially the worst therapist and the worst parent on God's green earth. So what do? I know that my clinical director, she's a working mom who struggles with time management. And, I kind of share that story with her. She says, oh yeah, I know, that's happened to me too. Our admissions person also, oh my God, I've done that a million times. And slowly I feel the shame boiling down so I can be more present. I can not have that part of my life being consumed, and I can experience more connection and experience more presence with other people because I'm not consumed in a tunnel vision of shame, of I'm wrong, I'm bad. So I just take a moment like that. That's a very kind of benign story, but you times it with many levels of intensity and severity to describe what a lot of you are going through. A lot of the viewers and a lot of people present today are in a constant state of shame because they're struggling in a relationship with someone who has an addiction. They themselves struggle with addiction. They're in a lot of state of hurt and pain because of it. They are maybe watching their kids struggle because of it. And so it is all consuming. And when you are in that state, you're unable to be fully present, to be fully showing yourself or experiencing connection with another person. So it's absolutely imperative that we stop and learn about these concepts of empathy and compassion, not only because we need it to help heal ourselves and our shame, but also we need to learn how to be practicing it correctly to others and to ourselves. Let's think. So empathy is a feeling. Let me give you some definitions of what empathy and compassion are. So empathy is the most powerful tool of compassion. So it's kind of a piece of being compassionate. Empathy is an emotional skill that allows us to respond to others in a meaningful, caring way. Empathy is the ability to understand what someone is experiencing and to reflect back that understanding. The major emphasis is that it's an understanding of maybe the emotions and not necessarily the event. You know, someone could not be a mom and not forgotten to drop off a lunch, but still be like, oh man, I know that embarrassing thing when you just show up and you don't have what you need and you're not prepared, and the shame voices that happen then. It's important to note here that empathy is understanding the feeling and not feeling for them. If someone's feeling lonely, empathy doesn't require you to feel lonely too, but just reach back into your own personal experiences of loneliness and knowing how that feels. Empathy is the antidote to shame, and it's at the heart of connection. And let me just define compassion really fast too. It's recognizing the light and dark in our own shared humanity. We commit to practicing loving kindness with ourselves and others in the face of suffering. We use the word, or an emphasis on the word, practice. Why? Because empathy and compassion aren't kind of these natural default states, kind of similar to that shame resiliency that we were talking about last webinar, that we want to believe that some people are just more resilient than others, or that some people are just more empathetic and compassionate than others. That might be the case, but these are skills that actually can be built up, improved, honed, and you can become more empathetic and more compassionate. And I will tell you, I certainly have struggled for a long time with empathy and compassion. And these things have helped me improve my skills, or hopefully they have. The difference too is sometimes people mix up the words empathy with sympathy. And sympathy is actually, what they're saying is the reverse of empathy helps you connect with people more. Sympathy makes you disconnect from people, because it's basically like not saying I feel with you. It's like I feel sorry for you. So, wow, that sounds really unfortunate that things like that happen to people like you, but it doesn't happen over here. So I feel sorry for you. Oh, gee, that must be really terrible. It communicates that, you know, poor you, because you're struggling with it. This isn't like a common struggle that happens to all humans. And you can understand that with sympathy, that, oh, bless your heart, oh, you poor thing, that could just kind of re-emphasize the shame of like, oh crap, maybe I am the only one. Maybe I am this unicorn that's struggling with this particular issue, and you'll just feel more disconnected. So empathy, let's start with that. How do we improve our empathy skills for ourselves, and things that we need to be looking for when we're in our state of struggle and we're going to our loved ones, or we're going to that group, or we're going to that therapist for help and support? What you should be looking for as far as empathy to help you lower your shame experiences. But the first thing is perspective taking. So have a critical awareness of the lens that you're seeing things through. When dealing with betrayal trauma, we often take it personally. You know, so the people who are in a state of betrayal, there's this constant tape that might be like, how it's my fault, how it's my problem, why didn't I have sex with him or her more often? How could I be so dumb? Why am I just taking this abuse or maltreatment? How could this partner do this to me? So it's natural and painful, but it's important to realize that oftentimes someone else's act has little to do with you. And so you have to kind of take perspective. They're a reflection of that other person's struggles, shames, and priorities. So just kind of take a perspective and understand, you know, where's this person coming from? And conversely, when someone is listening to me about struggling with me being in a partnership with someone with addiction, just understanding like, okay, I don't understand addiction, but this person's coming from a different environment, a different situation. That doesn't mean I can't still be present with him or her. Staying out of judgment for yourself and for other people. So judgment is often an extension of our own shame. So do keep that in mind when you're kind of hearing something and you're kind of putting all these values and details about it, like, oh man, just leave the person. This sounds terrible. You sound like you're getting abused, and just get out of there. You're just supposed to be listening, just hearing what they're sharing. When you're in a state of struggle and shame about something, it's common for us to kind of scan what other people are doing, judge their decisions, choices, priorities, and maybe hope that we can, we can prove to ourselves that we're better than them. Maybe like, oh, thank God I don't have that problem, or that, geez, I don't think your problem's as bad as my problem, or something like that. The third really important part is to recognize the emotion. So if I'm sitting there at lunch and my clinical director's there and I'm like, oh man, I had a major screw up today. I drove up. I realized that I totally forgot to bring my son's lunch. And, she can just automatically see that maybe she recognizes the emotion of disappointment. She can recognize the emotion of feeling really frazzled, or feeling like she's struggling with the time management of balancing work and being a mom. Again, she may have never forgot her kid's lunch, but she could be appropriately empathetic with me if she can remember any time in her life that that's happened. So you're trying to, when you're listening to someone's story, you're trying to listen for what are they expressing? And you can even ask, you can say, well, it sounds like you're really sad, like you're really disappointed. And it's like, no, I'm not disappointed. I'm freaking angry. I'm so angry that this person did this, or that this person had the gall to say this to me. So you have every right to ask questions, to clarify what's going on. Please tell me what the emotion is that you're going through. Mad, sad, glad, or afraid. Clarify, ask. What am I feeling when I'm listening to them? What are they feeling? Get in touch with yourself. And how you might have experienced some version of that emotion. Again, you don't have to have gone through that exact event, but you can connect with some version of the emotion. The next touch point is to communicate that emotion. So yeah, a colleague told me recently that he took his licensing exam and ran out of time. And I took my licensing exam and the power went out in the middle of it. So it shut my test down, and I had to wait 6 months to take the test again because the whole system shut down and whatever. So I can take maybe similar to that event, not the exact version, but stop and go, oh my gosh, I remember that. And I'm so sorry that you've had to experience that. I know how much time and energy goes into that. And so my heart is breaking hearing that story, because I remember what that felt like, the level of disappointment. And again, it doesn't have to be accurate. This is one of my favorite things about empathy as we're growing and practicing it and improving it. You can always circle back and go back to it. And so that discussion about me being really sad of hearing about his license exam and kind of touching back with him, it happened a week after he'd already told me what happened. Because after our discussion, I realized I was really cluttered. I was really distracted and wasn't able to be fully present with him about his story about not passing the exam. And I didn't feel right with that, because I could connect with how terrible those moments felt and how much I questioned my competency. And so in my heart, I just really want to circle back and go back to him and say, I wanted to reemphasize that I'm really sad to hear about the testing situation for you. I remember this, kind of let him know that I remember that feeling, and that, I hope he can hang in there and keep trying, to just let him know that don't be in shame and don't experience disconnection, because we've all struggled this way. And then the last point is to be mindful, which mindfulness, you hear this a lot, but it's be aware of what's going on don't judge it or let it define you or over identify with what's going on, but you must be mindful of like, wow, this story is really uncomfortable with me. So I joke that anytime someone talks to me about their teenage daughter and how much they're struggling with it, my heart rate goes up because my daughter's now almost 12. She's like at the precursor of being a preteen, and it is something I have not sorted out and dealt with in my life. So I know when my heart rate goes up and I'm trying to be empathetic and present with someone else's struggles, I'm going to screw it up because I have so much shame and so much fear about that particular topic that I struggle. I want to fix it. I want to hear that the story ends up okay, that they all end up being wonderful adults and like have fabulous lives, because I can't handle it. And so it's just encouraging you to be mindful with what's happening to you when you're sitting there trying to be present with someone with their empathetic, with their story of struggle. And so a couple more little pointers is for you to be asking yourself, when you share something personal and vulnerable and you feel really understood, what does it feel like? And then when you share something personal and vulnerable and you don't feel like anyone understands, what does that feel like? And then when you are sharing something personal, this is really important for you to stop and check in with, okay? When you're in that state of pain and you've shared these really hurtful, shameful, difficult stories with either your loved ones, your friends, your partner, therapist, whatever, what are you looking for? What helps you feel like they empathize? Is it eye contact? Is it nodding their head? Is it, do you need a hug? Can I hug you? Do I need to give you space? If you're crying, do you feel more comfortable if that person's crying with you, or does it make you feel uncomfortable? Listen, do they need them to just listen and stay quiet? Do you need them to not be looking at you because you're feeling so self-conscious being vulnerable? Do they need to respond right away, or can they stop and be like, whew, that was really heavy stuff. Can I sit with this for a while and talk about it with you? What do you need from these supportive loved ones, or even for yourself when you're in these states of shame and hurt and struggle? And then conversely, when someone is sharing a difficult story with you, what do you find going through your head? So this is the mindfulness piece. Do you worry about saying the wrong thing? So do you avoid contacting that person who just lost a spouse or a child or another really extremely difficult situation because you're like, I could never even fathom what that must be like, and so I completely feel incapable of supporting them, so I'm just not even going to engage and hope that they sort it out somehow. You just want to say the perfect thing, and so you try 6 different things and hope that that's going to magically take them out of their struggle. Or you just get so overstimulated physiologically that you can't be present because the exchange is so uncomfortable for you? Or do you worry that you don't show enough emotion? I can tell you from having the job that I have, and you hear so many sad stories and so much trauma and pain, there's this constant fear in my head that I'm going to kind of lose my capacity to emote and connect with these emotions, because you hear such extreme spectrums of what people go through. And so I always kind of check that. And then I don't know what to do if I really don't want to know. So if someone keeps telling you something and you're just like, oh God, please don't tell me this story anymore. I don't want to hear any more of this. This is too painful. This is too difficult. I'm too uncomfortable with this. Or you struggle because you just want to fix it. So there's a few ways that we can kind of screw up empathy. And so again, pay attention to what's happening in your world when you're seeking out empathy and connection and support from other people. And then how you might be screwing this up. Because by the way, the things I'm going to list, we've all done. We're all capable of it. So it's not meant to be like a shaming situation. It's just meant to be like, oh yeah, I blew that one. Okay, this is why I blew it. But you can always circle back and say, when you said this to me, I don't feel like I supported you properly. This is what I really want you to know. So the 6 ways that we often screw up empathy is to indicate whether or not shame is warranted. So the friend who hears the story and actually feels shame for you, the friend might gasp and confirm how horrified you should be. Then there's an awkward silence, and then you have to make them feel better. So I forgot the lunch. Oh my gosh. Oh, I just don't know how you people that work and try to take care of kids, like, I just don't know how you do it. That's just terrible. Your poor son. I mean, how does he feel? And then you're like, no, he's going to survive. Like, we have a backup meal for him. He'll live to eat another day. Because it's not anymore about you getting me too. I understand it's about you making them feel like it's not as big of a calamity as they're making it out to be. Sympathy. So it's that, oh, bless your heart. Oh, you poor thing. So rather than, I get it, I feel you. Disappointment, a friend who needs you, then by the way, it's not just friend, loved one, spouse, whatever, who needs you to be the pillar of worthiness and authenticity. This person can't help you because she or he is just too disappointed in your imperfections. So it would be if I came home and I told my husband that I forgot the lunch, and he was just like, see, I told you that you working was just not a good idea, because then stuff like this falls off and then our kids suffer. That would just the spiral, right? Like, I can't handle that you screw up. Don't tell me things like that anymore. And you could see how that would be an absolute killer for connection. So judgment or righteous anger, that friend who's just so uncomfortable with the fact that you're being vulnerable and sharing this really unfortunate story, that they either just have to like pull you out of it. So kind of use blame of like, God, why did you even put yourself in that situation? What were you thinking, or throw blame at it, that maybe it's like a friend, it's like, God, if your husband helped drop you off, the kids off at school, or helped you more, then none of this stuff would have happened, instead of just being like, I get it. This is really terrible. I'm sorry. Minimizing, the friend who's all about making it better, out of his or her own discomfort, refuses to acknowledge that you can actually be crazy and make terrible mistakes. You're exaggerating. It wasn't that bad. You're perfect. Don't worry. So kind of like I call that the yes men crew, where just you're not like held to accountability for anything. You're not allowed to be flawed or anything. It's just like, oh, you're fine. You're a great mom. Stop it. That's not connecting to the emotion of what I was really struggling with. Like, thanks for telling me I'm a great mom, but right now I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling like another person needs to acknowledge that we do screw up as parents. And like, anyone out there, can anyone say, yes, that's what I need. I don't need you're the great mom, you're fine, everything's great, you have a great life, stop complaining. Comparing or competing, the friend who confuses connection with the opportunity to one-up you. Oh man, that's nothing. Listen to what happened to me one time. So the person that can't even be, and granted, usually in these moments of empathy, it will sometimes say, I went through that one thing in that one situation, and it's an extension of, let me show you how I can completely empathize it. That's a little bit different than someone that's like, oh, that's nothing. I mean, come on, you forgot the lunch. One time I left my kid at school for 3 hours, and like, oh, that was really embarrassing. So stop complaining. That was nothing. I don't, there's no reason to be shameful for that situation. You just need to get over it. So again, I think all of us, depending on our own mental health, fall short in those different ways. And again, you can always, once you recognize that, circle back. That is like the ultimate courage, is to be able to circle back and say, whew, I really blew it when you were sharing that uncomfortable thing with me the other day. And I really want to check in with you again about it, and let's talk about it. So I challenge you with that. And I'd also look to see if you didn't feel that, you have a close loved one that you feel kind of fell short with empathizing and connecting with you in a moment, I'd encourage you to have enough courage to come back and check in. And you know, when I shared that story with you, I was really hoping you could just kind of understand what I was going through and be present. And I really struggled with the fact that you just kind of sloughed it off, told me it's nothing I should be angry about. Like, can you understand what's going on with me? Because like I told you, when you screw up on empathy, you screw up on connection. And you don't want to continue to set the tone for, I am not a safe person to come to when you're in a vulnerable place. That will just destroy intimacy. So a little, and then the last part is on self-compassion. So in self-compassion, you don't take on another's emotion. That's enmeshment, not empathy. You're not responsible for them. You just feel for that person in kind of like a safe, removed place. So compassion's, not someone coming to you and then you have all the right answers in the world and you're going to coach them out of their struggles. Compassion is just sitting there, two flawed people in their, common humanity, just being present in their state of struggle, and so the three things that you have to do compassion right is self-kindness. And so this is also, by the way, not compassion for another person, but compassion for yourself. Because obviously, if you suck at it for yourself, you're going to suck at it for somebody else. And I can tell you, like, I'm a walking, talking person that struggled with self-compassion, and then I wasn't that good at doing it to other people, or at least it was a fake version of it. So self-kindness. So kindness, talking to yourself, and then talking to other people. Talk to yourself like you would talk to someone that you loved and was precious to you, and you appreciated their vulnerability and their kind of fragility. Constantly keep in mind the common humanity, that we're all in this together. There's no less than, there's no better than, there's no excluded, there's no exclusive. We all are struggling in some level or not. It doesn't matter your race, socioeconomic class, your geography, your time in history. We're all in states of struggle at various moments. Mindfulness, again, to be mindful of all this, be aware of what's going on, but don't let it define you. So don't judge it. Don't let it take over the whole process. Don't let it, don't over-identify with it. Just kind of know this is what you're doing. Let me just see if there is anything else. Oh, if you do struggle with self-compassion, which probably many people chiming in will probably, I found this really great workbook. Kristin Neff, kind of a famous self-compassion researcher person. She even has there's a couple resources for you to kind of continue to explore. There's this thing called the TOSCA, which is a test of self-conscious affect. To measure like your own shame self-talk. If you kind of use a lot of guilt self-talk towards yourself, blame self-talk, it's really really eye-opening for you. So they say, so you can go to the daringway.org, TOSCA evaluation. So TOSCA evaluation, and kind of do the test and find out, what do I struggle most with? How, in what ways, in what categories am I using really negative self-talk? Or where do I lack self-compassion? That's a great assessment tool to use. And then Kristin Neff has a self-compassion scale. So you can go to www.self-compassion.org, test-your-self compassion, sorry, it's the next page, compassion-level HTML. But I bet if you just kind of Google Kristin Neff self-compassion assessment or something like that, you can kind of test yourself and explore where you might fall short, kind of where the chinks in the armor are and where you need to improve. And also those are great recovery tools for people who are here because they're struggling in their relationship, or they're struggling with their own addictions, and they need to kind of improve that category of their life. Because remember, you ain't getting out of any of this until you build shame resilience, and you ain't getting out of the shame resilience, or you're not going to experience shame resilience without experiencing your own level of empathy and self-compassion and receiving empathy and compassion from other supporters. And that is it for today.
Well, that's a lot, and that's great stuff. And even so, first of all, as someone who survived raising a daughter through the teenage years, I want to tell you, call me. But and I have an amazing adult daughter. She's turned out, yeah. So it had its bumps. I had people that were around me that would go, here's what you're going to experience, and you'll get through it. And here's what I did. And that was really helpful for me. But one of the things I thought of, the first thing when you were talking about, you know, the lunch and all that, there was an incident, and I won't go through the whole story, but there was an incident with my daughter, and it ended up being this legendary thing. Like all she had to do was, well, then there was the pumpkins, and, and like I'd go, oh, and what she finally told me later, she liked pushing my buttons with it, of like how I'd fallen short, but she said, I was so proud of myself. She managed a situation because I failed her as a mother, I wasn't where I was supposed to be in time. And so, she figured it out, and she was super proud of herself for figuring it out. So one of the things that I had this huge amount of shame about was a really empowering moment for my child, and also a moment of leverage for her, because she kept, she could go, and then there was this, and so it's one of those things where having perspective. But even like when you're talking about this self-kindness, like the falling short, and I'm thinking, it is falling short, but it's also an opportunity. So if I'm going to look at it as a kindness thing, maybe I look at it as I want to be a better person. So I'm going to look at it as here's an opportunity for me to gain some muscle strength. I love that you're talking about this. It's not like you either have empathy or you don't. It's something that you can develop, you can grow, like a muscle you can exercise. So if I want to learn to be more empathetic, there are some things I can do that will help me change that. When you're talking about all the different things that that are less than helpful, the judgment, minimizing, and all that, and like I had immediate flashbacks of moments when that had happened to me. I am 100% confident I've also done that to people too. But of course, I think about when people, didn't show up for me. I think it's a real, it's a really great gift to circle back, all the way around, because it does build connection, but it also takes some bravery. You talked about being courageous, because it's really easy to go, oh, well, that was in the past, and we'll just we'll just skip over that, and not circle back, but if I circle back and go, wow, Kristin, I'm really sorry I didn't show up for you the other day. And, like I was so harried or whatever, I was in my own stuff, but I apologize. And, so let me do it better, do it differently or whatever. And, that's a real bridge, and, can remove, because what I thought of with those situations was how those people were less safe for me, so exactly. I'm less likely to look for empathy, support, but I'm also less likely to be there for them. So, completely kind of like you talked about with the sympathy, it's like pushing away. I think if people fail to connect or fail to circle back, like I put them in a different spot. They're not in they're a safe place for me to, to connect, from that standpoint. But, there's so much here. I think, the staying out of judgment and shame, and like you're talking about, I can be super critical of myself, and to learn to be, I'm human, I'm not perfect. I don't try to be, well, I just strive for, but I will never be.
I try to be perfect.
Yeah. I failed it so much that I just don't even try for that anymore. But, it's one of those things where, like I want to model, I think particularly having kids, I think it was, what do I want to model for, kids? And I don't want to model, me being neurotic, trying to, be perfect with everything. In fact, it was really, really helpful. I'm sure, complaining to my husband and daughter about, you guys don't help. And they said, well, we don't do it right. We don't do it your way. So why should we even bother? And I thought, wow, I can either learn from this, and I can be more open with this, and they can do it whatever way, or I can be doing everything by myself. And,
right.
And that was a huge, I appreciated that they were brave enough to say,
right.
You're way too demanding and you're too much of a perfectionist on that. But it was a really good life lesson for me, because I stopped and went, wow, this is not what I want, ultimately to, I'll be slaving away doing whatever, and they'll be watching TV or having fun, so There's so many life lessons if we're open to them, but empathy, and I think that the self-compassion, because sometimes it's easier for me to have empathy for other people and still be really hard on myself. So learning to have that all the way around is a skill, but a gift, and really helps with attachment and relationships and building bridges. So appreciate it.
Yeah, and I invite anyone who's watching right now, to ask any questions about empathy or resources, or sometimes too, when we're in a state of pain and feel like we've been victimized, words like empathy and compassion kind of trigger anger. Like, I need the empathy and compassion. That other person can, go somewhere bad because you're in. But if the goal is to heal yourself, then definitely empathy and compassion are an important set of exercises or practices to use in your life. And then if reconciliation is a desire in your relationship dynamic, empathy and compassion are absolutely going to be necessary as well. They help rebuild connection, help rebuild trust, help you realize that this is a person you can be safe and vulnerable with. So
I think it was really important too, what you talked about is, what do I need from this? And so sometimes, because I know I can be a fixer. Well, let me tell you how, I've got the solution here. Let me tell you how to fix this, but like, if it's just, I just need to be quiet and listen, and nod my head or look you in the eyes or whatever it is that I need to do. I hear from lots of partners in particular who, their family, friends, understandably are saying, leave the son of a gun. And, and they're just looking for some, I hear how difficult this must be for you. I just holding the space for them rather than fixing it. So,
yes.
So I think, if I can have the, Kristin, all I need you to do is listen. I just need to vent. Can you do that for me? And if you go, no, I've had a hairy day. Okay. Whatever. But if we're able to have that conversation about, what it is we really need, we're more likely to get what we really need, from the relationship too.
Yeah. The answer is not to just cut these people out of your life and say, okay, this is a loss. Again, there's so many different pieces moving on, but if I'm in a state of shame and struggle, and then that leads to more feelings of disconnection, and I seek out empathy and compassion from other people, those are all failed attempts. And my only response is to just pull more away, disconnect more, become more of an island. You can see how this just spirals out of control till you have extreme anxiety, extreme depression. Maybe you have your own addiction that you kind of escape into because you want a better, you feel comfortable with the relationship that you have with your bottle of Jack Daniels instead of the relationships that you have with loved ones. That's not the answer. You have to kind of figure out what you need to feel empathy, to experience compassion. You need to find the people. That's why these support groups are so important. Websites like sexandrelationshiphealing.com, because you all need to just keep fighting for that connection, keep fighting for that shame resiliency, because that is the only way out.
Well, and I think one of the things you talked about is, like, even if I haven't been through that exact situation, if I can find the feelings within myself and go, wow, I feel similarly. And, when I'm talking to people about, connecting with meetings or whatever, it's easy to compare and contrast and go, well, I'm not like that person because, and they're, you mentioned it too, they're better, they're worse than me. So there's always that. But if I can find how I connect on the feeling, I hear they're feeling shame about that. Well, gosh, I felt shame, or they're feeling hurt, they're feeling anger, whatever. If I can connect on that emotional level, that is a point of connection for our relationship as well. So we have a question. It says, I find that I'm a fixer too, easier to help others than myself. Could being a fixer be a type of projection from our unconscious to be able to hear out loud what we need to hear? Does that make sense?
Projection of our own unconscious to be able to hear out loud what we need to hear. Um, I don't know. I mean, I find sometimes making movements towards helping others can feel more controllable than trying to fix our own lives, right? So the issue with fixing is a struggle with vulnerability. So if I work towards fixing your life, it's your life. So that means I'm not totally invested in the outcome, that I just need to come up with a list of a couple concrete things to help you. And that feels a lot safer than kind of the enigma that's my struggle, because I could try a bunch of things and I might still be in that state of struggle. And I think that's a little more uncertain and chaotic, and that makes it harder to be vulnerable in those moments. So does that make sense? So I'd encourage people who are trying to be fixers to explore the vulnerability and how, like, to me, fixing is also like a level of trying to control and like manipulate. Don't mean those in bad ways, but control the situation because I'm uncomfortable with the vulnerability. What's going on here?
Well, and I think it's sometimes it's easier to see what's going on. You've got some distance. Right. So it's easier right. to see it. So, but when you're in your own weeds, it's more challenging, and it doesn't feel like there's if you do this, this, and this, it'll all be better. But, and the level of control, but also, well, I've helped you. So I feel good because I've helped you. You know what I mean? So, I get to have a positive experience about it. And I've seen so many things where the most meaningful thing someone could say is, I know how, I can only imagine how difficult this is for you. I don't have words, but I'm here for you.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't do the A, B, and C and you'll be better.
Yeah. And I actually, to be fair, like, as I'm kind of processing it, I was just actually having a session with a client, and we were talking about kind of the arbitrary measurements of what makes us feel secure in our body image. So for him, he had a very specific weight and a body percentage. And I was kind of sitting there with him going like, yeah, I mean, do you feel like that's kind of like an arbitrary number? Does that really affect who you are as a person? So let's say I was trying to kind of fix it. I was trying to take him out of that mentality that he's only can be secure in his body image if he meets these brackets. But at the same time, while I'm sitting there, as long as I keep this mindfulness of how I'm experiencing this and how I'm engaging in this discussion, I can sit there and be like, God, you're such a hypocrite, Kristin. You you step on that weight scale, and if that weight scale pops out a number that you've arbitrarily determined is a number you don't want to see, it can ruin your whole day. It can affect your confidence. And so there is sometimes when you're present with someone in a fixing conversation, as long as you're kind of hearing, you're paying attention to your own prescription and your own fix-it solutions, that can sometimes be a reflection of like your own medicine that you need to be taking.
Well, one of the things I hear you saying about this particular client is you're asking questions of that. For me, fixing is, well, Kristin, if you do this is like, I'll give you the 3 things you need to do, and then I fixed it. So that's a dialogue, and you're inviting someone to look at it from a different perspective. And, and like going back to the example with my daughter, when she finally, said, that was a really empowering thing for me, completely changed the lens, of that particular thing. So I think it feels different, at least for me, when I'm in fix-it mode. It may be because it's uncomfortable for me and I just want to get it past whatever. There's a lot of things that could be coming for me, but I know I'm in a different mode than if I'm listening and I'm helping you look at things and, changing the lens or whatever. So, I don't know, I don't know which category of fixer, you're considering, but, but I know for me, that's a trap I can fall into, and I have to, for myself, be really conscious of it, that people don't really want me to fix them. They just want me to listen. So,
yeah.
Okay, so I find myself trying to practice empathy in my betrayed relationship. I can quickly turn to criticism. When my betrayer so clearly doesn't feel empathy, I find it challenging to give empathy when there's little emotion mirrored back. Is that the best time to just take a break or find ways of communication? It feels the same storm over and over.
Right. And so you can determine that if you have the skills in that moment to be present and mindful of what's going on for you, then you could probably try to approach it in that moment. More often than not, I get pretty overwhelmed. Like my nervous system gets really overwhelmed because obviously I'm engaging in a conversation where there already might be shame or stress or things that are physiologically really overwhelming for me or that other person. So I might need to take a break, and then I get these like ruminating thoughts. So it's like, gosh, when he told me that I maybe should quit my job because I forgot my son's lunch, I I heard, wow, if you screw up in this tiny way and it makes me like you less, or I question your competency, imagine all the other things that he's judging me for. And then I don't even want to show myself to him, because why would I show myself to him if he judged me on this tiny little issue? And so I I kind of formulate the communication in my head of what's really going on inside me, what my shame voices are, the story that I'm telling myself because of that exchange that happened in our communication where maybe there was an empathic failure. And then I go back to that question, that what were you searching for, Kristin, when you engaged in this conversation? What did you want to hear? Well, I think I wanted to hear, yeah, I know. I mean, things like that happen. I've done it too. That's okay. Let's just, how can I help you? Let's do this better, that we're a team, despite the fact that you messed up today, like, that's okay. I still love you in spite of your flaws. Those were the things that I wanted to hear that would have made me feel like my struggle was being met with empathy and compassion. And so then I can go back into that conversation and say, when I say these things, when I'm in this state of struggle, these are the things that I was really hoping to hear. Maybe you don't feel them, maybe you don't think them, but that makes me really sad, because the way that you responded makes me feel like I don't ever want to show myself to you. I don't ever want to share these really vulnerable pieces of me. And I just don't know how trust is going to be rebuilt when that's happening between us, and it's making me sad. So that's just some ways.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, it sounds like it may be early in the recovery process, and so the betrayed or the betraying partner hasn't built up the skills to, they may still be really disconnected, not giving them an excuse. This is not it just may be a reason. But, Dr. Rob talks about, all the time, as a betrayed partner, for the first whatever, year and a half, whatever, your job is to be angry, and your job is to, to get support from other people. And the person with the addict, or the addict, needs to get support from their support people. They can get empathy from their 12-step group. They can get empathy from the drop-in groups, whatever. But your job is to, to process through the betrayal, the trauma of the betrayal, the grief over losing the relationship you thought you had, the pain of how, painful this is for you. So I kind of feel like it's not fair for you to even have to try to, be empathetic, for the betrayer. So I'd say some self-compassion for you maybe is like,
right.
It's okay for you to be not feeling any empathy. The betrayer can get that from somebody else. So
yeah, that was a good addition, because I was going to say, how do you feel about it when you experience that empathic failure? Because what I hear is kind of almost a disappointment in myself that I set out to do empathy. It turns into criticism. And in a stage where you're already experiencing so much hurt, so much disconnection, so much struggle, I would hate for you to kind of create a second tsunami wave of, see, look at, I'm totally screwing it up. I'm trying to come in with empathy. All I ended up doing is biting his head off. And then I just feel like crap myself. Like, when are we ever going to get out of this? So again, that's that mindful component That's that compassionate self-talk, that self-kindness that kind of needs to kick in so you can heal.
Yeah. If you're able to be empathetic with other betrayed partners in other places, great, but yeah, that with that particular relationship, particularly if it, which is what it sounds like, it's, early in recovery, that would be a really difficult feat to manage. So, and then somebody that talked about the fixer said,
follow up. Yeah.
I hear myself giving advice that I actually needed to hear. I reflect on what I said. That's awesome. Sometimes I think, people are put in our paths so that we get to, so we get to say what we need to hear. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I, just a side note, like the word hypocrite in our society is so negative. I think that, I just, one time there was a pastor talking, and I think I've told this story before, but I personally have a history of being very hurt, and I feel like very victimized by people who kind of preached being like good religious people, and then kind of turning around and like being very non-empathetic, very non-compassionate, super judgmental. And so I just kind of learned to hate like hypocrites, because they were extension of so much of my pain of like, why wasn't I enough? And then one time this pastor just kind of said, you know what, bring me your hypocrites. This is exactly where they belong. This is exactly where I want them to be. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Like I sit there in judgment about people who kind of say but not do, or speak, and these are things that they should be doing for themselves. But really, I do that all the time. And maybe by the 20th time of me preaching it, I'll actually hear it and use it in my own life. And there's nothing wrong with that process. Like I really released myself of the anger and judgment that I'd put on people who kind of talk the talk but never walk the walk, because that's our process. That's our humanity. That's what happens.
Or it's a process where, it happens 20 times, but 19 of them you do what you would be advising other people, but that one time you don't, and you get called out for being a hypocrite. So again, the self-compassion of like, okay, I'm going to circle back, and I'm going to try to do it better. But I think we do get very, very rigid and focused on, it's good or it's bad. You're a hypocrite or not. I mean, whatever. And we probably all fall into those categories, at different times, even unintentionally or really against what I want to be. But, I find myself doing something that I go, why did I even do that? I don't know, So, it's a process. Any other comments or questions? So I'll say, if you joined us after we got started yakking, I was yakking, there are drop-in groups, including there's a betrayed partner drop-in group at 12:30 Pacific time today on Wednesdays, so for this recording. And then we've added a men's group on Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So there's a wealth of resources. In fact, tonight then there is also Dr. David Fawcett has his webinar live at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and so he does a webinar, so he'll give some information. I had the opportunity to do it with him last week, and then he too answers questions. He's one of the collaborators on the curriculum for the Seeking Integrity Los Angeles Men's Sex Addiction and Intimacy Disorder or Co-occurring Sex Addiction and Chemical Dependency Treatment Program. He wrote Lust, Men, and Meth, and is an expert in the field. He's got several podcasts as well. So he's he does a great job. I'm so grateful for all of the, the people that we have contributing to this site, because it's like, you get to show up or you get to watch it on YouTube, and it's all free, but it's, there's, some really helpful information to help us live better and differently. So, thank you so much. Exactly what I needed today. Great. Thanks for being here. So we appreciate, those of you that are here live with us. It makes it more fun when we have questions to answer. And but Kristin, as always, I so appreciate the information you bring. It's I've got 3 pages of notes, that I always do that. I'm like taking notes. So thank you for that. And Kristin will be on the second Wednesday of the month. So we'll see you in August, but do plug into the rest of the resources. So.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you joining today. And feel free, you can always go on my website, go to my YouTube channel, or email me at kristinsnowdenmft@gmail.com if you have any follow-up questions or need more resources or anything like that.
Great. Thanks, Kristin. Thanks, everybody.